Well, welcome to the College Admission Lab from Con Lab School. I'm Brennan Barnard, College Counseling Advisor at Con Lab, and I am joined today by our founder, Sal Khan. And Sal is also the founder and CEO of Khan Academy, Schoolhouse.World, and Khan World School. Welcome, Sal.
Good to see you, Brennan.
And our guest is John Leach, who is the Associate Vice Provost for Enrollment Management and University Financial Aid at Emory University. And that does all fit on one name tag, right, John?
Most of the time, yeah.
It's good to see you.
Good to
And
see
this
you.
evening, Sal is going to take on the host role as we discuss college admission, affordability, and the value of college. And please share your questions in the chat and or in the Q&A. And also, maybe if you could, if you're just joining us, go in the chat and share where you're zooming in from and whether you're a student or parent or educator. And then, of course, we'll use the Q&A for questions. And before I turn it over to Sal, John, maybe you could just give us a brief overview of your kind of educational and career journey, how you got to where you are.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. So I started my career as all financial aid people do. I started my career as an AP US history teacher. I taught AP US for about 10 years. Moved into the college counseling sphere, Brennan, not quite as extensively as you have, but did that for a while. Shifted over to admissions and financial aid. First at my alma mater, and these were the Steph Curry years at Davidson
Oh,
College. So this was these were the Cinderella days at Davidson. I've been a director of college counseling at a girls' school in Princeton, and I've been AVP at Emory for about 11 years.
well, lots of great experience from both sides of the desk, and got to work with our good friend Chris Gruber at Davidson. So I'm sure you have lots of stories to tell. But
Absolutely, he's probably got more to tell about me, but yeah.
well, Sal, I'll turn it over to you, and we can take questions from the audience, and we'll let it go from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brennan, and thanks again, John, for joining. And I'll remind everyone who's watching, definitely put your questions in on the chat. I will be trying to scan it. A little bit of multitasking, so ahead of time's apologies if we missed your question. I'm sure they're all going to be great. But John, you know, you have a lot of experience in many things, as you just mentioned, in admissions and financial aid, but financial aid is your core focus. Let's just start at the most basic level, and then we'll get into the nuance. What does a college education cost these days? All in, if we're talking about tuition, room and board, public versus private, just give us some of the grounding, and then hopefully we'll hear some good news from there about financial aid.
Yeah, okay. So cost of attendance. So what you just described is cost of attendance, and the cost of attendance at institutions across the country varies quite a bit. So 2-year colleges, for your public institutions, and my world is the 4-year private institution. The sticker price, and I want everybody to take a deep breath because the sticker price is built around a lot of different assumptions, but that cost of attendance, tuition fees, room, board, housing, food, all that stuff, um, for a place like Emory is just over $90,000 a year. So that is not those dollars are don't even cover the cost of running the institution. So we require other sources of income, primarily through endowment to help support carrying out the kinds of education that we offer. State schools, of course, are supported by states, so that is a cost that is far lower for very, from my seat, very obvious reasons. So let's jump into how that 93 is not
But
actually that
real
93.
quick, just to make sure we get the full um, pie, and then we'll talk about financial aid,
Yeah.
which hopefully make us feel better. Uh, that that includes room, board. It won't include like travel. So if I,
So no, yeah. So Sal, sorry, it includes there are 5 or 6 major components. So it's tuition and fees, housing, room,
Mhm.
food, board, books and supplies, travel to and from the
Okay,
institution, and personal expenses. And these are federally established. Cost of attendance is a federally
okay.
defined entity, and so those are the things we are required to pull in to determine our COA, our cost of attendance.
So
We
it's
love
Okay.
acronyms and financial aid. Yeah.
it's an average of what travel might cost for
An
people.
average of what travel. So travel is, the cost of a plane ticket to school, to go home during winter break, back to school, and then to go home at the end of the spring.
It
But it,
does not cover pizza money.
So food is in there, Brennan. So and the personal expense piece is it's a little over $100 something a month, and that does include sort of
Oh, okay.
wacky pizza expenses as long as you're getting the cheap stuff. Yeah.
okay. So if you want your child to maybe get a little bit nicer pizza, or have, they're doing a little bit more socializing or whatever, or you have a longer plane travel, it might add a couple of $1,000 to that.
Potentially, and by the same token, we go pretty high on the travel expenses. So it may actually be, and it really is typically less than that. So the average family doesn't think about, oh,
Yes.
how much does it cost to clothe? Well, many families don't think about it. So it is the most inflated possible, not possible. It is the most inflated price. Yeah. Yeah.
And one, yeah, possible the kids are flying business
Yeah,
class.
right.
But
Yeah.
the one extra question before we get into the solutioning, that is currently. So what kind of inflation have you been seeing? If it's 90,000, like what was it? What was that same number roughly the last 2 or 3 years? And should we be extrapolating that?
The short answer to that is if you take off about 3 to 4.5% and walk that back for most institutions so the private four-year institutions, typically at the higher end of the selectivity scale, you could walk that back and back out the price and get a sense of where the sticker price has been historically.
Okay. So safe to assume that the sticker price, and we're about to go into the better news, but the sticker price, 3 to 4% inflation a year.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Now make us feel better. How do we think about financial aid?
Okay. And so at the heart of what I do, it's all about net price. So the real cost of a place like Emory is when you adjust for both the increases that we provide in terms of grant and scholarship aid and regular inflation, inflation across the United States. Emory is slightly cheaper now than it was 20 years ago as a net price, and that is true across the industry. So
Adjusted for inflation.
adjusted for inflation
Inflation.
and adjusted for the amount of grant and scholarship aid that schools are pumping into their own student bodies. So to put it another way, tuition and like if you just look at tuition and fees, or if you look at that total cost of attendance, private four-year institutions are cheaper now than they were 20 years ago. If you take inflation and grant and scholarship into consideration. All of you can go check out trends in college pricing. It's a College Board document. Just Google that. Go look at all their wonderful graphs, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. So this is
And
yeah.
just to double click on that, that is on average, I'm
Oh
assuming.
yeah. That's
Because
the average.
if someone
Correct.
was paying full tuition, that's not true.
If
But
someone is paying full tuition at an institution like Emory, we use econometric scales to assess their ability to pay. We don't assess their willingness to pay. That's more on the merit scholarship side. But on the need-based side, we assess the ability of families to pay, and it is a scale that sort of works its way up. And for us right now, in fact, I looked at this earlier. If you take into consideration multiples in college, I think the highest income that Emory is looking at receives some need-based financial aid, So like a couple $1,000s. The highest income is in the high 400s, low 500s. So it is a sliding scale for families and this is part of what we do, right? So for families at Emory starting in fall of 26 that make $200,000 and less, Emory will be tuition free for those families, going forward. So we care a lot about this. And, Brendan, I'm sure you saw the news, like it was late last week. Hopkins has come out with this. There may be 4 or 5 institutions out there that are playing around with
And
the income caps to set tuition. It's an easier message to communicate.
in some states, so my alma mater, Franklin and Marshall, they have the Commonwealth promise or something like that, and or Commonwealth commitment. And if you're a Pennsylvania, even though it's a private school, if you're a Pennsylvania resident and you make under a certain amount, then it's totally tuition free. But
Right.
what would you what would what percent of your students, John, are making are paying full boat?
It is under 50%. So it is about, I think it's about 47, 46% that pay from our perspective. So that is that their funds, wherever, however their cash flow is assessed, that they would be paying the full cost of attendance.
And I mean, what you just said, I think is worth underlining about the 200,000, because, Emory's doing this, several other well-established private universities with like they're doing 200,000 below, which is a large fraction of the population. If your family income is below that, free. And how
Tuition free, not cost of
tuition
attendance free.
free.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are there any what how do y'all think about, like, if someone's at the high end of that range, closer to the 200,000, obviously circumstances I know apply and there's a lot of permutations,
Sure.
but I would assume if you're closer to the high end, if you're making 190,000 and you have one kid in school and everything else is looking all right, you're probably getting free tuition, but now you probably are paying room and board and travel.
That's right. So we have our costs for families in that range are going to plateau,
Mhm.
right? That is, they're going to get the cost of tuition as grant and scholarship, but they will pay around 28, $27,000, depending on what sort of choices they make in terms of housing and their meal plans. And to be clear, most families below $100,000 are getting a lot more than tuition in terms of need-based financial aid. So many of them will get virtually up to the full cost of attendance. So we're talking about $90,000 that they would receive in Emory grant, federal, and some state if they're from Georgia.
I mean, first of all, applaud y'all on that. That's huge. I mean, I pick on a lot of higher ed on their costs.
Right.
Those numbers we
And we
started off
deserve
with.
we deserve not a small amount of it. And we've done a terrible job of communicating this, Sal. I mean, that's one of our
Yeah.
we do a really good job of communicating it student by student, right? So your kid applies, is admitted, decides to attend Emory. That family knows what Emory's going to do, right? But broadly speaking, the general public, it is very, very difficult. And we've done a really, I like this new program. We call it Emory Advantage Plus because it does communicate, in very simple terms. Here's what will cost at the high end for families at $200,000 and below. And we still have aid for families above 200,000. It drops off a bit.
Well, and the question I hear a lot is from families, if say they're making, 250 or maybe just right at 200, and they're wondering, is applying for financial aid going to impact my admission decision, right?
So yeah, so Brendan, it's a great question, and the short answer, I can't think of a way to express this more clearly. That family that's making 250 is still going to get something in the order of $25,000 in grant aid from a place like Emory. So that family absolutely should apply for need-based aid. I mean,
Not gonna,
will that impact their admission? It has everything to do with that. If a school is need blind, it's not going to matter, right? If a school is need aware, they're not going to be able to dodge that assessment anyway. So the short answer is, yeah, absolutely. Apply for financial aid. The hardest part of a place like Emory is the admission process. And that one piece of applying for financial aid, if that family says, oh, I want to stay off their radar in terms of financial aid, but then needs the money, I'm having a hard time, figuring out how that family is able to afford a place like Emory anyway. So you've got to. It's unavoidable.
And we had a question on the chat. What all the numbers you just applied, that applies to international as well?
No, we
Okay.
are we do not meet full demonstrated need for international students.
Okay. And that might be different from university to university.
That so you will find at the highest, most highly endowed institutions in the country, and I mean probably you could count them on one hand.
Yeah.
Those places are maybe a hand and a half, Brendan, right? Those places are able to meet full demonstrated need for international students, but that is some rare air right
Okay.
there.
So this is, but what you, I mean, even what y'all are doing is fairly rare air too,
Yeah, right,
to
right.
your
Yeah,
credit.
I don't mean to
It's even
downplay what
rarer
you're.
air,
Yeah, yeah.
rare
But there
air.
is, but there is a misperception that international students are all full pay. And
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's kind of out there in the media right now. And in fact, a lot of international students are require aid.
And that is true. And places like Emory do. I mean, we do have a limited aid budget for our international students, and we have a number of international students who, we are supporting them because they are bringing extreme talent. And this is one of the important messages that we like to make is we're bringing in talent. These are incredibly strong students, and with as small a pool as we've got in terms of need-based aid for international students, these are superstars that we're bringing to the country. We're lucky to have them.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit? There's another question on the chat. How do y'all think about merit aid? Does Emory do merit aid? And then how does that come into the equation?
Yeah, we are one of those institutions that's kind of on the merit aid bubble. So we're about of the 250 million that we award in financial aid each year,
So a class size
about
of about how much? About
for an undergraduate population of about 8,000.
eight. So for all the, yeah. So it's 250
Yeah,
million a year across
yeah,
roughly
quarter of
40.
a billion for 8,000 students. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, About 10% of that is merit aid, merit scholarships. Yeah. So we're a 90-10 school. Many schools, as you know, as y'all probably know, as you go further up the selectivity chain, there are either sort of conference restrictions, association restrictions. Ivy League does not have quote unquote merit aid, but they do have programs like this 200,000, where they're just assessing income and just going from there. So short answer is yes, we do have merit aid.
Well,
And
and
is
as you go less selective, right, the tuition discounting and under the name of merit is what's the national tuition discount, like 65% or something like that?
It is 50. I think the latest was about 57%, Brennan. So it's not quite there, but it's not nothing. I mean, it is very significant. So that the national tuition discounting rates include both merit and need-based aid. And you're absolutely right. A lot of institutions that are amazing institutions, they're not quite in the need-based aid, sort of dogfight that we are in. They are in another sort of merit scholarship, tuition discounting conversation with their peers to try to attract students. So there are lots of options. Sort of the further down you go in terms of maybe the wider you go in terms of selectivity as a student and as a family, the more merit dollars are available.
and when we're talking merit, are we talking purely academic merit, or this is also athletic scholarships?
You can define it any way you want. So the institution, athletic dollars are, you got to play the sport, and and if it's a Division I, Division II team, you
Right.
stick with that. Okay, you will have that scholarship.
But can,
Most of the,
can I
go
just put
ahead, go ahead, Brendan.
a
Yeah.
pin in that for a second? The idea of a full ride athletic scholarship is a unicorn, right?
Right. Steph
People
Curry at
yeah.
Davidson in 2008. Yes.
Right, right, right.
I
I mean,
mean,
I
Brennan, you and I, but yeah, most people don't get that. No, I'm kidding.
right, right.
Right, right. Most, I have worked in the Division I field, in the Division I space, and Davidson's men's soccer team. We were talking about how we pieced together a few $1,000s And then, hopefully using that to enhance the need-based aid picture where available. So it is that full, Brendan, you're absolutely right. Those marquee sports with those full rides at the Division I level, they're extremely rare. However, the bigger discount, I mean, sort of bringing it back home to something that's a lot more available, the bigger discount for slightly less selective schools is real, and families should absolutely ask questions as they're visiting schools, right, Brennan? To ask about what is the merit, what are the considerations for merit-based aid?
Well, and Sal, you brought up kind of, is it academic? And yes, it is, but also sometimes it's just, I mean, they're discounting kind of across the board, right? Like a large percentage of their students, some schools, a large percentage of their students are getting, a dean scholarship or a president.
Some little taste, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And what would you say, I think there's some people I'm sure are wondering, this is the age-old conundrum. You're a student and maybe you have a pretty size, let's say you're falling into the category where you wouldn't get the need-based financial aid or significant need-based financial aid. You're weighing a university with coming from a wider applicant pool that's giving you a huge merit scholarship versus um, a more selective, more prestigious university. What would you tell your child in that?
So this is, Brennan, Sal's question really sort of has a foot in each of our worlds. I would say, first of all, have this conversation as early as possible, right? There's no need to hammer a student with selectivity, but there's an incredible benefit to having the cost conversation early on, and provide some context as a family to that student as they work through those years. Brendan,
Yeah,
you're probably
both ability and back to your earlier point, ability and willingness.
that's absolutely
And
right.
and what are those decisions going to mean, right? Like, okay, yes, we might be able to send you to a more expensive school, but it's gonna mean these sacrifices to our family. It might mean not taking vacation or not having a car or selling the second house or whatever it might be. And so having those kind of opening up the books for kids and really having those conversations is super important.
Yeah.
And
Wouldn't you say, Brendan, that adding cost to the broader description of fit is really important for families to take into
Yeah,
consideration? Yeah.
and as they build their list, they should have not just kind of academic kind of likely schools, but they should have schools that are likely financially, affordable, right?
So what I'm hearing from you, Brennan, is make sure your child is appropriately appreciative.
Yes.
You
Yes.
can go there, but dad might not eat this year.
Right, right. Well, and to your point, Sal, the kind of idea of how you know, do you pay more for the more kind of quote unquote prestigious school? I think part of that conversation should be, ultimate goals, right? Like, do you want to go to grad school? And so if you're going to be hoping to go to a more prestigious law school, maybe you don't go to a school where you're spending a lot of money as an undergraduate and you're more at the top of the kind of, you're a big fish in a smaller pond at the less selective school, and it sets you up for that law school that you now maybe can afford.
Yeah. What would you say? I mean, John Brennan, what I have a point of view. I'm happy to share mine is I mean, everything's a stereotype. We're talking in generalities right now, but what are the advantages of potentially going to a private school, whether or not you're getting the financial aid or not? Like, if you're saying private versus public or more selective versus less selective, what are you getting if you go to the more expensive? And as we know, it's not always more expensive. It actually might be cheaper to go to a private school if you make less, your family makes less than 200,000 a year. But how do you think about it, John?
Well, the short answer is, you know, as a lifelong educator, as someone who supports students, making informed choices, um, I would say weigh it is up to the family to weigh the choices on their merits and really do research. So Emory is a fantastic place. And it's a, I've got two kids, one's at Emory, one has finished at Georgia Tech. Emory was the perfect school for my senior and her areas of interest, and she's been able to dive deep into things with professors. And I think you have the professor to student ratio is significantly more favorable to the student in those situations. The access to resources to do independent research, and frankly, an alumni network that is incredibly powerful. That takes nothing away from a public school like Georgia Tech, where the kids are just doing gangbusters. So I've got I'm a house divided internally, and I'm a product of private education and public school, but it was great for me. But I think that families need to really do their research and see, it may not be the football game or the party scene that defines reality of those 4 years. It really needs to be something that takes a deeper dive. And Brendan, I don't know what else you would add.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that, and Sal and I have talked about this a bunch. Is kind of it's what you do with where you go, right? It's
Right.
the opportunities you take advantage of, and and so as families are looking at the right kind of match in a college, students really need to understand, like, where am I going to have those opportunities to do the things I want to do and do them well, and whether it's research or opportunities for experiential education or work-based learning, or whatever the priority is for them. I mean, how accessible are those going to be?
And I mean, related to that, we started this conversation on the cost side of things, and this is kind of getting into the benefit side of things. And y'all both said, and it's not always more expensive or private leads, but it's a generality. But whether it's, I mean, a lot of the big research universities that are public have great opportunities, great everything. And some of the small private universities, to your point, won't have the big football game, won't have
Right.
the,
Right.
but so there's the benefit or the compare and contrast the experiences themselves, and then there's the opportunity post undergraduate. How do y'all, especially John, how do you think about this? Not all majors are considered equal.
Mhm.
Sometimes I feel like that's sacrilege to say that, especially from a income point of view. Not all universities, even for the given major, have the same job placement. How transparent is that to students or families, or how much should they be considering that?
It's as with just about every question that we're grappling with, there's a lot of complexity to it. So I would say that short-term income advantages of things like business degrees, engineering degrees, you know, that's real. Those are real opportunities. However, the long term flexibility and the nimbleness. I'm a big believer in the liberal arts. I'm a big believer in humanities, and this may surprise both of you. I have a religion undergrad degree, and all I deal with is data sets and econometrics now. And I credit a lot of that nimbleness of mind to my liberal arts background, and I lean on it all the time. So it's a great question. It's kind of the difference, Sal. I would say it's kind of the difference between, okay, what sort of person were you when you were 23 or 24 versus who you are now? And how much of that is due to your major? And I would suspect that the answer would be, hey, you were a curious, you were a curious kid, you were a curious young adult, you're a curious, older adult.
Well, and
Go
yeah, go
ahead,
ahead.
Brendan.
I was just gonna say, I mean, right, like 3 years ago, computer science degrees were the most selective. I mean, you couldn't get into a computer science program, right? And now it is the largest kind of unemployed major right now. And so it's hard to I think, like John's saying, I think it's sometimes less about the major and more about kind of the experience you have.
Is there a way to find out these things? Like if I'm, I do think it would be interesting to see, okay, this major at this school, what percentage have a job within, 3 months of graduation, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's a there are a number of different sources that will track majors and incomes straight out of undergrad. And that's, in fact, right now, the gainful employment financial value transparency portion of the of last year's higher ed update. Schools are now having to report out on, okay, what are the incomes of your various major at program level to the federal government. The data behind that will be available, I think, in a year and a half. If the Department of Education is capable of managing the process, and you will be able to track income levels by program. The good news around that is exactly what we've been talking about. You'll be able to say, oh, okay, this is what that 23, 24-year-old makes. It does not take into consideration what does that, you know, bachelor's in English who goes on to become a lawyer, who then proceeds to earn all the money that they ever wanted. So it has some usefulness, but it's not crystal clear. And I think doesn't the college scorecard have some of that as well,
Yeah,
Brendan?
the
Yeah.
college scorecard does, and I just put a link to a website called Degree Choices in the chat. And Degree Choices tracks some of that. They use some of the scorecard data and some data from Third Way, which is a advocacy organization, to kind of around some of the transparency around that. And then the other one is the Georgetown Center for Education and the Workforce. I'll put a website for that. That's helpful too.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it looks, I mean, time flies when you're having fun. So thanks. One, I guess, big final question. We obviously talked a lot about financial aid because that was what we build this conversation about. But let's just finish at a very high level. People are always wondering about, I guess, both the combination of paying for college, financial aid, return, et cetera, but also just the big question of uh, admissions these days feels so Byzantine to the outside. Sometimes well, Byzantine is the right word. Arbitrary. What do you say? I mean, some people have done their first rounds of applications. At least the seniors this year, they've done their kind of early
Right.
applications, which, by the way, also feels like a game sometimes. Which one do you go early decision, defer, all this kind of stuff. What advice do you have for people? What are the misconceptions or the correct conceptions that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, so let me bring it back to price. In this conversation, price cost is an important part of fit, right? So check out the net price calculators. There's a really useful tool called My Intuition, which schools like Emory, I think there are about 50 schools now that have it. And it's like 7, 8 questions. I mean, like literally you could complete a My Intuition cost estimate within about 45 seconds of starting it. We also have there's a new product from My Intuition, and this is an economist from Wellesley, Phil Levine, who's pulled it all together. That's just a visual that shows what the net price would be. So it's a quick net price estimate. I would start there. um, I would say that there are thousands of colleges and universities in this country. The conversation tends to only be about, the top 20, the top 50, the top whatever. There are so many colleges and universities in this country, and the number of schools that have that, sell that quote unquote Byzantine approach. The reason that the holistic approach to admission, when you have admit rates that are below 20% or below 10%, is that they could fill their classes multiple times over with the number of applicants. And Emory is one of those institutions. I mean, we're very fortunate to have demand that far paces the size of the class. Um, but those students can apply to a number of different institutions and know somewhere between almost immediately and very quickly in a rolling admission environment. So we are, as a nation, we are blessed with a lot of fantastic options. Small liberal arts schools, big R1, regional publics. Brennan, what else would you add to that?
I would just say, I mean, in terms of resources, I would say read Dream School, which is a new book out by Jeff Salingo, because it really highlights a lot of this, exactly what John was just saying, and another book is was The Price You Pay for College by Ron Lieber, who's a New York Times columnist. I'm actually going to be interviewing the two of them together in early December, and we'll send out the information about that. But they really kind of give a context for how to get a college degree and not go broke and have a great experience and kind of stay open to possibilities.
Right. And some of that might be coming to Emory, and some of it might be going to any number of institutions that are out there. I
Yeah,
couldn't agree more, Brennan. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful, and I'll just add to that. And thanks, John, for being part of this. It reinforces what Brennan
Absolutely.
and I say, and Brennan alluded to this. There's no right decision. You got to make the decision right. And I encourage people to, um, like, if you actually, I've gone to some, I visit a lot of schools these days. I enjoy meeting students, etc. And there's a lot of large research one state schools where the facility where they might have a 70 or 80% acceptance rate, and the facilities and the research and everything are top notch. Honestly, they're better than some schools with very low acceptance rates. And there's a bunch of liberal arts colleges. Some are highly selective, some have reasonably high. Well, you can still get that 12-person seminar, and you can still get that attention. And you could go to any school, and if you go with the wrong attitude, you might end up with a bad outcome. And you could go to any school, and as you mentioned, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of really good schools in the U.S., which on a global basis, any one of those could actually be one of the best schools in any one country. So we're very, very lucky. And so hopefully that reduces stress for folks. And, anyone who thinks that they're kind of, and you can tell whether you're in the running for an Emory type of school, those students will do fine. They're going to go someplace
That's
good.
right. That's a great way of
They
putting it,
might end
Tom.
up,
I mean,
this might be better than the Emory because they've got a little tougher getting rejected.
that grit really makes a difference. I agree with you completely. It is, we take great students and we maintain them and hopefully nudge them to even more greatness. But there are a lot of more regional schools that do tremendous work out there, and
and the truth is
we're
that
lucky.
if they have parents who are invested enough to tune in tonight, they're going to do just fine anyway.
Yes, that's the
Well, that's
biggest
true.
correlate between
Right.
success. Not where you go to school, but whether you go to a webinar hosted by us.
That's right.
Right. I want to see that data set. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I'm
right.
sure it'll hold up. The tuition's lower.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks, Brennan and John. This was a lot of fun, and
So,
good luck to everyone.
have a great night.
All
Thanks,
right.
y'all.
See y'all. Bye bye.